A telegram arrives in London, encrypted in a cipher no one has seen before. Inside its coded lines lies a German proposal so explosive it could shatter American neutrality and reshape the entire war. But the message is useless without the key. In a cramped Admiralty office, a small team of codebreakers faces an impossible deadline. If they fail, the secret dies with them. If they succeed, they might change history. The clock is ticking, and the cipher refuses to break. In August 1914, as Europe descended into war, the British Admiralty faced an invisible enemy. German warships communicated across vast distances using wireless telegraphy. Their messages traveled through the air in coded pulses that seemed impossible to intercept, let alone understand. The Royal Navy could hear these transmissions, but they were meaningless strings of numbers and letters, secrets locked behind mathematical ciphers that appeared unbreakable. Then something unexpected happened. A small group of civilians were quietly summoned to the Admiralty building in London. University professors, linguists, puzzle enthusiasts. They were not soldiers. Most had never seen combat. Some had spent their careers studying ancient texts or teaching mathematics to students who would never use it. Yet these unlikely recruits were about to become Britain's first line of defense in a war fought not just with battleships and artillery, but with information itself. They were given a cramped office on the building's ground floor, room 40. No grand title, no official designation, just a number on a door. Inside, they began the painstaking work of transforming enemy radio signals into intelligence that could sink fleets and shift the balance of power across entire oceans. The Germans believed their codes were secure. They transmitted orders, positions, and battle plans with confidence, never imagining that across the North Sea, a handful of amateurs were learning to read their secrets. What started as an experiment would become one of the most consequential intelligence operations of the First World War, proving that wars could be won not only by those who fought hardest, but by those who listened closest. Room 40's breakthroughs came faster than anyone expected. Within months of the war's start, the codebreakers were reading German naval signals with startling accuracy. U-boat positions materialized on charts before the submarines surfaced. Fleet movements were predicted days in advance. The intelligence was precise, actionable, and arriving on the desks of British admirals with enough time to act. But the admirals didn't act. The men commanding Britain's warships had spent decades at sea. They understood wind, tide, and the weight of a broadside. They did not understand mathematics worked out in a cramped Admiralty office by civilians who had never fired a gun. To these officers, Room 40's intelligence felt like guesswork dressed up as certainty. How could a professor with ink-stained fingers know where a German battlecruiser would be tomorrow? The idea seemed absurd. So the reports piled up, read and dismissed. Room 40 would send word that a U-boat was operating in a specific grid square. The information would reach a destroyer captain, who would glance at it, shrug, and continue his patrol elsewhere. Days later, a merchant ship would go down in the exact location Room 40 had identified. The pattern repeated with grim regularity. The disconnect wasn't just skepticism, it was structural. Naval command operated on instinct, experience, and the chain of command. Room 40 operated on intercepts, frequency analysis, and probability. The two worlds spoke different languages. Admirals wanted certainty. Room 40 offered likelihood. That gap proved costly. In one instance, Room 40 decrypted orders revealing that German cruisers would sortie into the North Sea at a specific time. The intelligence was passed up the chain. British ships were positioned to intercept, but the admiral in charge, unconvinced the Germans would actually follow their own plan, held his forces back. The German ships completed their mission unopposed and returned to port. Room 40 had been right. The opportunity was lost. The codebreakers began to realize that breaking the cipher was only half the battle. The other half was convincing men in gold braid that a piece of paper could be trusted more than their own judgment. It was a battle Room 40 was losing. Ships were sinking because of it. Most people stop at the surface of history, but you're still here. So if you want the parts they don't teach, the truths buried beneath time, consider subscribing and becoming part of those who chose to see it all. Now, let's continue. January 17th, 1917. A coded message passes through British hands, intercepted from German diplomatic channels. Routine procedure until the codebreakers in room 40 begin their work. What emerges from the jumble of numbers stops them cold. German Foreign Secretary Arthur Zimmermann has sent an instruction to the German ambassador in Mexico. The proposal is breathtaking in its audacity. If the United States enters the war against Germany, Mexico should be persuaded to attack the American Southwest. In return, Germany promises to help Mexico reclaim Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona. Territories lost 70 years earlier. The message also suggests that Mexico should encourage Japan to switch sides and join the Central Powers. It is an act of diplomatic sabotage aimed directly at American neutrality. A plan to ignite war on the United States' own border. The men in room 40 understand immediately what they hold. This single document could shatter American isolationism. It could bring the United States into the war on Britain's side, tipping the balance of a conflict that has ground into exhausted stalemate. But revealing the telegram creates an impossible dilemma. To share it with the Americans, Britain must admit it has been intercepting and decrypting German and American diplomatic communications. The United States routes its own messages through British-controlled cables, trusting that its ally respects their privacy. That trust is a lie. Room 40 reads everything. If the Americans discover this, the betrayal could poison relations, perhaps even push Washington toward neutrality, or worse. And there is another danger. If Germany realizes its codes have been broken, it will change them. Room 40's entire intelligence advantage, the invisible edge that has guided British strategy for 3 years, will vanish overnight. The decision moves up the chain. Admiral Hall, the Director of Naval Intelligence, takes the telegram to Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour. They cannot simply hand it over. They need a cover story, a way to make it appear the telegram was obtained through other means. Hall's team begins working backward, searching for a plausible alternative source. They discover that the German embassy in Washington sent a copy of the telegram to Mexico City, using a different route, via commercial telegraph lines in the United States. If British agents can obtain that copy, it will look like the leak came from within Mexico or the United States, not from British code breaking. Hall dispatches an agent to Mexico City. The agent, working through a contact in the telegraph office, retrieves the Mexican copy of the telegram. Now Britain has a version it can share without exposing room 40. But even with the cover story in place, the risk remains immense. The British government hesitates. Weeks pass. The telegram sits, its explosive potential locked away, while diplomats calculate the cost of revelation. The war grinds on. German U-boats sink more ships. British and French forces bleed in the trenches. And in Washington, President Woodrow Wilson still clings to neutrality, still believes America can stay out of Europe's war. The men in room 40 can only wait, knowing they have changed history. If anyone dares to use what they have found, how do you justify betraying an ally's trust to save an alliance? The Zimmermann telegram sat decoded on Admiral Hall's desk. It was a weapon more powerful than any battleship, and infinitely more dangerous to wield. The words were clear. Germany was promising Mexico chunks of American territory in exchange for attacking the United States. It was the provocation that could bring America into the war, but revealing it meant exposing Room 40's greatest secret. Hall faced an impossible equation. Show the telegram to the Americans, and they would demand to know how Britain obtained it. Admit to intercepting American diplomatic cables, because that is how they captured it, from traffic routed through British-controlled lines, and the alliance could shatter before it formed. the United States would recoil at the violation. Germany would change all their codes overnight. Room 40's entire operation would collapse. 2 years of painstaking work, every future intercept, every advantage, gone. But say nothing, and the war could be lost. Hall chose deception within revelation. He sent an agent to Mexico City to steal a copy of the telegram from the Mexican Telegraph Office. The same message, but appearing to come from a Mexican source rather than British interception. It was a lie built around a truth. A shell game played with the fate of nations. When he finally presented the telegram to the Americans, he handed them the Mexican copy, not the original intercept. The source appeared to be espionage, not code-breaking. The room where empires turned held its breath. If the Americans suspected, if the Germans realized, if anyone looked too closely at the seams of this carefully constructed deception, everything would unravel. Hall had gambled Room 40's existence on a forgery that was not forged. Authentic evidence disguised to hide how it was obtained. On April 6, 1917, the United States declared war on Germany. The telegram had done its work. Room 40's secret remained intact, buried beneath layers of misdirection that would not be fully understood for decades. Hall had won by hiding his victory, changing history while erasing his fingerprints from the crime scene. The war ended, but Room 40 did not simply close its doors and vanish. Its methods, its successes, its entire operational philosophy became the foundation upon which Britain built its intelligence future. The Government Code and Cipher School, later known as GCHQ, emerged directly from Room 40's blueprint. The lessons learned in that cramped Admiralty office, the techniques refined through 4 years of relentless cryptanalysis, became doctrine. Nations that had dismissed code-breaking as academic curiosity now scrambled to build their own versions of what Britain had quietly perfected. Yet the men and women who had shaped the war's outcome returned to ordinary life, carrying secrets they could never share. Dilly Knox went back to Cambridge. Nigel de Grey resumed his publishing career. Alistair Denniston continued in intelligence, but always in shadow. They had intercepted thousands of messages, influenced naval battles, exposed espionage networks, and altered the course of diplomacy itself. But official recognition remained forbidden. The Official Secrets Act sealed their achievements behind walls of silence that would stand for decades. Families never knew. Colleagues never understood the absences, the late nights, the quiet intensity that lingered in their eyes. The world moved forward, believing the war had been won through trenches and battleships, through courage and industrial might. The invisible war, the one fought in coded telegrams and mathematical patterns, remained hidden. Room 40's existence was not publicly acknowledged until the 1970s, more than 50 years after its greatest triumphs. By then, many of its members had died without ever receiving the recognition they deserved. But their legacy lived on in ways they could never have imagined. Every modern intelligence agency, every signals intercept station, every cryptographic operation traces its lineage back to that single room in the Admiralty. The principles they established, systematic interception, collaborative analysis, the integration of intelligence into strategic decision-making, became the standard. Today's cyber warfare, with its invisible battles fought across encrypted networks, is simply Room 40's war translated into digital code. They proved that information could be as decisive as firepower. A handful of minds working in secret could shift the balance of global power. And perhaps most importantly, they demonstrated that the wars we never see can determine the world we inherit.